I was that nervous about this tent that I took an extra tent with me when I went camping, just in case. Hello, so as promised in my last video, the one I did with fish a couple of weeks ago, I'm going to do a full review of the Forceatt 2-person tent. Like I said in that video, there isn't actually a model of this. It's a tent off Amazon. I bought it to prove a point that you could get reasonable kit really cheap. I did £250 full kit, including bag. It included my fuel, everything, all in 250 quid. I'll share a link in the description to that video. Go and check it out if you've not already. But this tent was the biggest surprise out of everything I bought. It cost £55 and it's got some ridiculously premium features in it. Now don't get me wrong, it's heavy at about 2.5 kilos, and the materials are your standard cheap tent materials. However, some of the features on this I think make this the best budget tent that money can buy. So as you can see by magic, the tent's set up. I will share after this a time lapse of Dylan setting it up. Now, this tent is something that Dylan hasn't seen before. He didn't come on the camp when we took it out. And like I said, it's got some really, really good premium features. Now, what I'll do is, I'll start with some of your normal basic features. So, you've got your half mesh inner. You've got a decent sized bathtub floor. If I move my legs out the way, as you can see, comes up a good, probably 4 to 5 inches. Which is ample enough to keep the drafts out. The tent does rise about the same off the floor, so you do get a good bit of airflow. With airflow, obviously, like I said, you've got the half mesh inner, which makes it really, really breathable. I had no issues with that when I camped with it. Like I said, materials, they're not ripstop nylon, it's your basic cheap tent material. But like I said, it's also a £55 tent, so what do you expect for the money? The poles are aluminium. They are 9mm, I think, from what I remember, or they could be 8mm, but what I'll do is I'll share that in the description. The zips, it's not YKK zippers, but they are a nice, easy flow zipper. I'll show you on the inner if I get in. As you can see with the zippers, it's very simple, and they can be done one-handed. The only issue you get is you do have just a little bit of slack in the fabric here. It's not actually slack, but it just makes it quite difficult to undo it. But it's easily solved just by using your second hand. For fastening the doors up, just your standard cheap fabric toggle, which they're functional, they work, but I much prefer an elastic one. And it's one of them, they could have raised the price by maybe a £5 and given us elastic toggles, but it's a small niggle. As you can see from the inside, I'm 6 foot. I've got a good 2 inches above my head, so it's got a decent amount of headroom. What you will find is, if you sat on their mat, then I probably will be touching. But then I've got another couple of inches before you're going to touch the outer, so it's no real issue. One of the premium features I do like while we're in here is an included gear loft, which is detachable, and it has got the elastics I just talked about on it. So if you didn't have a use for it or didn't want it, you could save a couple of grams taking that out. Pockets wise, there is 2 small triangular pockets at each end. With regards to the size of the tent, you know what I always say, 2-man tent's a 1-man tent plus gear, and 1-man tent is a very small 1-man tent. You always grade it up. But genuinely, you could get 2 wide mats in this, and I've tried it. So what I'll do is I'll get Dylan to come in with me now, and I'll show you just how big the space looks with 2 of us in it. Now, I'd like to add, neither myself or Dylan are small. I am 22 stone, and I think Dylan's probably about 17 stone. So we're 2 big blokes, but we will lie in it now, and I'll show just the width that you get. So, as you can see, I'm not touching the side, and there is plenty of room still between us. Which would mean, if you needed to, at a pinch, you could comfortably get 2 of you in this. Now, I still wouldn't recommend it. It's not the best with 2, but there's more than enough room. With regards to ventilation, you have on both sides this one singular vent, but it creates ample airflow. Like I said, you've got a good few inches down at the bottom where you also get the airflow, which comes through into that nice vented inner. You've got dual guy ropes, front and back, which can be pulled either behind or to the sides if needed, or wherever the wind is going to be pushing against it. They're not the best guy ropes, and they're very reflective. Now, if you want reflective guy ropes, that's fine. If I was changing anything though, the one thing I'd be changing, as you can see, is these very cheap plastic adjusters. I've found, especially if you're in any kind of wind, they will break. Not that I'd be recommending any high winds in this tent, just as a precaution. I'm not saying it can't handle them, I'm just saying the tent was £55. If you want something that's going to handle high winds, spend a little bit more, have something that's been independently tested. I just would be very dubious taking it up on top of a hill where you're going to be getting battered with a big storm or something that's very windy. Another premium feature I'm a big fan of are these clips for fastening your fly on. As you can see, they're the same sort of buckles that you get on your backpack, and you can literally fasten them in one-handed and adjust the same. It means you've got a nice sturdy adjuster. I would suspect this is where a lot of the weight comes from. Now, don't get me wrong, the fabric is a heavier fabric, but these clips will be adding quite a lot of weight. The internal fabric is all tape seamed, so it should ensure that it's waterproof. The hydrostatic head on this tent is 3,000 millimeters. That's both this outer fly and it is the inner floor as well. That's ample for most weather that you'd be using this tent for. I can't see you taking this in anything that's going to have enough rain that it would get past 3,000 millimeters. That is still quite a lot. There's quite a lot of tents that are not in the budget realm that come in a lot less than that. Things like the Robin's Chaser is only 2,000 mil hydrostatic head, and that's quite a popular tent. With regards to pegs, they're not the best pegs in the world. As you can imagine with a tent of this price range, I won't open that up. They are the cheapest of the cheap shepherd hook pegs. What I did find was with the pegs that when I took it camping, that we was on quite a rocky ground, and then pegs were just completely unusable. Pegs like that, I always recommend replacing, because any form of tough terrain and they're gonna just bend. What I would do, if you want to be on the budget end, is go to AliExpress, Temu, even Amazon, buy something similar to this. Now these cost me, I think, about £15, and they are titanium spikes, and these things are absolutely brilliant. You're never going to bend one of them. You could batter it with a hammer if you wanted, and it's just not going to bend, when you're not for putting it in the ground anyway. And for the sake of that peace of mind, 30 quid for a full set seems a lot, but you think what you'd probably spend 10 quid on a steak to take with you, and I'd rather make sure my shelter's sound and eat a cheaper meal than I'd rather make sure my shelter is sound and eat a slightly cheaper meal than have something like a steak to eat and have my shelter fail on me, or even worse, not be able to pitch it because of the pegs. With regards to the doors, you've got the option of either opening a single door. You also have the option that if you remove the peg, that you can roll the second door up and then you can have the side fully opened. This is a good option if the weather's really nice and it's really sunny and you just want to get that little bit of ventilation in. I know when I camped, I spent most of the day with both sides open like this, just to give that through air through, just to ensure that the tent wasn't getting too stuffy. One of the other features, and this is how I slept with it, due to the warm weather that we got, on the one night we didn't get wind, was you can actually open this up, and I haven't brought any spare guys, so I borrowed one from the back, but you can actually, if you want, tie a little bit of guy through this loop. I'll just use a simple knot for today. And you actually have the option to peg the door out a little bit further back, which, as you can see, creates a lot more airflow into the tent, as well as giving a more ample space for cooking. Your other option with this would be, if you wanted to, you could use a trekking pole, or if I find a stick, you can actually prop it up, just like so. And as you can see, that gives you even more space where you could get really good cooking. You are protected from the elements, and you've just got all the airflow if you really need it. It makes the tent very versatile. They don't advertise that it does this. These are little hacks and little playabouts that I've done and play arounds just off other tents that I've had. But I think it does give it another good feature, and I think it's something that the company should actually start advertising, because the ability to be able to do this, and you can even do it with both, and if need be, and I know this from a tarp tent, if you put that one out, you can actually get an extra bit of fabric to put between the middle if you made it yourself, or a little bit of tarp, and you can actually make a full canopy. So I've got my phone out for stats for you all, because I don't actually fully know the stats for this tent. So floor width of it, it states on Amazon is 225 centimetres by 135 centimetres. And your internal height is 110 centimetres, which is why, obviously, at 6 foot, I could sit up inside the tent with no real issues. It doesn't tell me the material of the outer fly, which I didn't think it would, but it does say it's PU coated up to 3,000 millimetres, which I did state. And in regards to other stats, other than your weight, which I've already given you at 2.5 kilos, that's your lot. There is nothing else. It doesn't tell me anything else about the tent. Not to be unexpected for a tent from China, it's a budget tent. Like I said, it's £55, but I think with the features and the size of this tent at only 2.5 kilos, it's a bargain. And this is where I challenge you all. You know, I've said I think this is probably the best budget tent that you can buy, and I know there's a lot of people out there that love the OAXs, and I know there's a lot of people that are going to say the Bobcat or the Fox one. I've had both. I haven't actually owned the Bobcat, but I have stayed in one because I borrowed fishes. Now, don't get me wrong, I like the Bobcat. Don't particularly like having fabric over my face, and it's only a one-man tent, and it's not much shy of this weight. The Fox one is each to their own. I've already done a video about that. I describe it as a Marmite tent. You love it or you hate it. I'm not a fan of it. I find it's too small, too restricted. It's okay if I'm getting in it at 10 o'clock at night, waking up at 5 o'clock in the morning, doing absolutely nothing other than sleeping, then it's fine. With regards to anything else, it's a no-go. Yet, on the opposite end of the scale, Dylan loved that tent, and for him, that's probably his favourite budget tent. He stayed in that for at least 12 months. It was the only tent that he'd touch. He found a way of propping the door out like we've got on this, so we could cook in it, so he could do everything he wanted. But for me, I just felt very claustrophobic and very not comfortable in that tent. Now, there are some nature hikes and stuff like that on the market, but then you're going way beyond this price point. And I just think, for the cost of this, you're not going to find better. It's festival tent prices for aluminium poles, for proper adjustable fly sheets with decent adjusters, to get a gear loft, which is something I've not seen in any tent under about £400. It's a lot of tent for your money. Now, I'm not going to be using this tent long term, and I'm only not going to use it long term for one reason, and that's purely because I've got tents of the same design and the same sort of structure that weigh about 1.2, 1.3 kilos. So for that, I can't justify taking 2.5 kilos with me. But I've also paid about 400, 500, even close to £1,000 for tents that are similar, just to shave that little bit of weight off. Now, I go out a lot and I use that tent all the time, so I can justify the cost. If you're just starting out, or you're a bit of a weekend warrior, or you don't go out very much, you're just testing it, seriously look at these tents. It's a lot of tent for your money. So there you have it, the Forceatt. Would you own this tent? Drop me a comment, let me know. For me, I think for the price, it's difficult to beat. Like I keep saying, it's £55. You know, it's a lot of tent for the money. Now, yeah, like I said, what would you do? Would you get it? For me, this was the biggest surprise in my kit. It was the last thing I bought. I got stuck with 10 that I bought. It was a Van Gogh one. It claimed on Amazon to have aluminium poles. When I actually did a bit of digging and research on it after ordering, I realised they weren't aluminium poles. They were actually fiberglass ones. So I cancelled that order. But then, because I was trying to stick to £250, I had a very, very limited budget. I actually had to cut back on some of the other things I was buying just to raise my budget up to £55, which is, as you know, very little for a tent. I fished about and I found this, and it looked too good to be true. And it was a case of, I was that nervous about this tent that I took an extra tent with me when I went camping, just in case. And I had a really good air mat with me. I had a really good quilt with me. The cook system blew me away. And this was the star of the show. Absolutely phenomenal. For somebody who, like I stated in that video, almost forgot my roots. I sleep in a lot of expensive and a lot of strange tents now. Now, the strange tents have always been a little bit about me, but I've got to the point that I can afford and I want better gear and lighter gear, and it takes away from what I wanted to do originally. And this really took me back to my roots, and it really surprised me. So it's a winner on my eyes, but let me know what you think. But anyways, from me and Dylan, catch us in a bit.